What's up, YouTube? I'm here to do my prediction video for UFC Fight Night Poirier versus Pettis. Let's start the bottom. The first fight is Darren Stewart versus Carl Robertson. Both these guys are really good strikers, but I feel like Carl is the much better striker. I saw him on Dana White looking for a fight, and he won by really quick knockout. I also feel like Carl has a better ground game overall, so I'm going to pick him. I think Carl is going to win by knockout or TKO. Next is Jake Collier versus Marcel Fortuna, and Jake Collier, to me, he's pretty much just a wrestler. I mean, he'll throw big strikes, but he isn't very technical. I feel like Marcel Fortuna is pretty much a jiu-jitsu guy with some decent boxing. I feel like Marcel Fortuna, at 205, he looks really good. He had that win at heavyweight, and, he lost a really close decision in his last fight, but I think Marcel Fortuna is still a pretty viable light heavyweight. I think Marcel is probably going to get the better of the stand-up and eventually win by knockout. Next, we got Court McGee versus Sean Strickland, and this fight's going to be really close. I think the winner is going to be whoever can either keep it where they want it. I think if Court can keep this kind of against the fence in a grinding kind of situation, he's going to win. And for Sean, if he can keep it on the outside and strike long, he'll win a decision. It's close, but I'm going to go with Court. I just think his forward pressure is going to slightly edge it out for him. I feel like, Sean's got good takedown defense, so I don't think Court's going to be able to take him down with his wrestling. But, yeah, I think Court's just going to be able to hold him against the fence just enough to get a split decision. I think this fight's probably one of the closest fights on the card, though. Next is Angela Hill versus Nina Asroff. And same thing, two chicks. They're both pretty good strikers, but I feel like Angela Hill is just the much better striker overall. I don't think this fight's going to hit the ground at all, so I just feel like Angela's probably going to win a 30-27 decision. Next, we got Sage Northcutt versus Michael Quinos. And they just keep feeding Sage Northcutt these easy fights because he can't fight anybody who's really good. I mean, he just lost to Mickey Gall, and Mickey Gall is just above average overall. You know what I mean? He hasn't beaten anyone super noteworthy, and I don't think they're ever going to let him fight anyone super noteworthy because he's probably not going to win. I see him winning this fight. I think he's probably going to win by knockout in the first or second round, but like I said, Sage Northcutt's never going to be a viable threat this weight class, but, good for him. He keeps on getting easy fights, and he keeps on going to get wins. So I think Sage Northcutt's going to win by knockout. Next, we got Tatiana Suarez versus Viviane Pereira. And Viviane Pereira's shown that she's really good. She's 13-0. She's like 2 or 3-0 in the UFC. But I don't feel like she's fought anybody with as good a wrestling and grappling game as Tatiana so far. I think that Tatiana's going to be able to hit takedowns and kind of control this fight on the ground. And, this is going to be Tatiana's big breakout party. She's going to crack into the top 15 with this win. And like I said, I think she's going to use her wrestling to get a dominant decision win. Next is John Dodson versus Marlon Vera. And this is kind of like whoever can use their speed better, in my opinion. I think these two are probably two of the fastest guys at this weight class. I think that Marlon Vera is a slight advantage, in my opinion, just because it's kind of like with TJ and Cody. I think he attacks with more weapons. I think he uses kicks, knees, and elbows along with his punches, as where John Dodson, it's just straight up boxing. I don't think this fight's going to hit the ground. Neither of these guys are really wrestlers, but I'm going to give a slight edge to Marlon Vera just because I feel like he throws kicks with his combinations, as where Dodson is just punching. And I think that both these guys are pretty close speed-wise. It's just who's going to be a little bit better that night, and I think Marlon Vera is going to get a very close split decision win. Next is Joe Lozon versus Clay Guida, and to me this is just, can Clay get out of the first round? Because Joe has shown in his last 4 or 5 fights that he starts to fade really bad after the first round. I feel like his jiu-jitsu game is a bad matchup for Clay, but if Clay can kind of just push him against the fence and just wear on him in that first round, I think the second round he'll be able to get on top of him and just beat him out until he wins by TKO. And that's just what I see happening. I think the conditioning is a huge factor. I feel like if Joe can't get it to the ground or hurt Clay with a big shot early in the first, he's going to fade really bad, and I think Clay is going to take big advantage of that. And I just see Clay winning by a late second round TKO. Next is Rafael Assunção versus Matthew Lopez, and they really want to build up Matthew Lopez. I think they really think that he's like the new guy at 35, but Assunção is just one of those guys. He's just like fucking Lamas. He's not going to go away just because you want him to. I feel like there are a lot of guys at the low weight classes that are in the top 5 that the UFC kind of wants to knock off that top 5. And it's just not going to happen. I mean, Assunção, I feel like, is the better striker. He's the better wrestler, and he's the better jiu-jitsu guy. I feel like, Matthew Lopez probably pushes the better pace and has better cardio, but I've seen Matthew Lopez get hurt in pretty much every single fight he's been in with the striking stand-up, except for the one against Hani Yahya, but that's the fight that he lost. So, he won his last 2 fights, but that's because he was able to out-wrestle the guys. He's not going to be able to out-wrestle a Sun Sao, and if it goes to the ground, I think a Sun Sao is a better grappler overall. I think that it's not going to hit the ground at all, and I think a Sun Sao is better striking. He's probably going to land a knockout punch sooner or later. So I've got a Sun Sao winning by mid-second round KO. Next we got Nate Marquardt versus Cesar Ferreira, and to me, Cesar isn't that great. I feel like he's kind of turned into this guy who just throws striking and kind of just tries to lay and prey on people. I feel like Nate Marquardt's the better striker overall and the better grappler overall. It's just an age thing. Is Marquardt still, able to keep up this late in his career? And I think he's still got a couple more wins in him. So I think that if this fight stays standing, he's a little bit better. If it hits the ground, I think that, it'll be tough just because Cesar is so much bigger than him. But if he can kind of get on top of Cesar, I think he should be able to dominate this fight. So I think Nate Marquardt's going to win by TKO, probably mid-second. Next, we got Andre Arlovski versus Junior Albini, and I really hope Andre wins this fight because I have a feeling this is probably going to be his last fight. He's almost 40. This is like his 40-something fight, and he's lost like 4 or 5 in a row. He looked really good in his last fight, and it was really close loss to a guy who's really good in Marcin Tymura. This is, a perfect fight for him because Junior's just going to stand and box with him. I think it's just going to be who can land that big shot first. And I'm just going to hope that Andre can do it because I really would love to see him go out on a win. Realistically, though, I think Junior's the faster guy and the younger guy. So he'll probably win. But I'm still going to go with Andre. I just hope he can get one final win on his record and then go out on top with a solid win. Next, we got Matt Brown versus Diego Sanchez. And I think both these guys are going to retire after this fight because I think that Matt Brown's going to win by knockout. I don't feel like Diego's got the type of striking that can keep up with Matt. I also feel like the best way Diego could win this fight is if he took him down and submitted him. But I feel like Matt Brown has a decent ground game, and Diego has never submitted anybody in the UFC that I know of. I think he might have had a submission from punches, but not any real chokes or anything like that. I feel like both these guys keep a really high pace, but Matt Brown's just a much better striker. And both these guys have their biggest strength was their chin, and they couldn't be knocked out. In their last couple of fights, they've both been knocked out. So for me at this point, there's no real reason for either of these guys to continue. If they're starting to get knocked out, that's the point in time in your career where it's like, okay, it's probably time to retire. But like I said, I think Matt Brown's got the much better striking, and I think his grappling game is good enough to keep with Diego. Possibly the jiu-jitsu aspect probably better. The wrestling, Diego, obviously. But I think Matt Brown's eventually going to land that big punch, knee or elbow or something like that, and win by knockout. Finally, we got Dustin Poirier versus Anthony Pettis. And this fight's really tough because Dustin Poirier's been knocked out in his last couple of fights. Even that fight against Eddie, the knees were pretty close. They were a little bit illegal, and obviously that fight was a no contest. And he got knocked out by Conor, and then not that long after that, he got knocked out by Michael Johnson. So he's been getting knocked out in all of his recent losses. As for Pettis, he lost that fight to Max Holloway, but that was from a body shot, and I think that was from the weight cut more than anything, that he was so diminished that he lost from that TKO. I feel like Pettis is starting to, slow down, but in his fight with Jim Miller, he looked pretty good, but Jim Miller is not, like, the greatest guy at this point in his career either. So this fight's super tough. I think that Pettis is the better striker overall, and Dustin Poirier definitely has the type of wrestling game where he can do what like a Sun Sao, or not a Sun Sao, but what RDA did to Pettis. I think he could probably take this fight down and control it on top if he wanted to. For 5 rounds, I have no idea. This fight's really close, but I think it's going to be standing for the most part, and if it is, I think Pettis is a little bit better there. And I think he's just going to eventually catch Poirier and win by knockout. I think this is probably going to be fight of the night. And I think when Pettis does eventually catch him, it's going to be late, like in the 4th. So I'm going to say Pettis wins by 4th round TKO. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.